All right, so get this. We're diving into, like, not one, but T2 Project 2025's today. Same name, wildly different visions. Our source, an article called 2 Project 2025's Love V's Hate from TATANKA.site. Now, TATANKA is all about, unity, inclusion, global collaboration. They're calling their Project 2025 a quiet rebellion of peace, which, I don't know about you, but I find that intriguing, right? But there's another Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation, and, well, let's just say their approach it's causing some serious waves.
Yeah, no kidding. It really makes you think, huh, two groups, same year in mind, but heading in completely opposite directions. It's like we're at a fork in the road for the future.
Exactly. So first things first, we need to understand what these 2 Project 2025s actually are. What are we even talking about? The TATANKA article lays out a pretty stark contrast, starting with the Heritage Foundation's version. They claim it pushes policies that some might consider authoritarian. They even go so far as to suggest that it could dismantle democratic values.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
Yeah. Strong stuff, and definitely something we'll want to unpack further.
Oh, for sure. What I think is striking is how TATANKA uses terms like, authoritarian control and erosion of civil liberties when they're describing the Heritage Foundation's project. It's so clear they're framing it as a threat, setting the stage for their own Project 2025 as the antidote. This rebellion of peace thing. It's, I don't know, I think it's a powerful rhetorical strategy. What do you think?
Totally. And that contrast, it really sets the tone for this whole deep dive, right? Because on the other side, you have TATANKA, and their whole approach is rooted in, love and unity. They're all about empowering communities and tackling those global challenges, but through collaboration. But is that really enough to counter what the article describes as a potential power grab by the Heritage Foundation? Can love really be a perceptible driving force for political change in 2025?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's almost too idealistic, especially in today's world. But then again, maybe that's precisely what we need, like a radical shift in perspective.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics. How does TATANKA actually plan to make this love and unity thing work in practice? Their article highlights 3 main areas: fortifying democracies, empowering communities, and addressing global challenges. Seems like they're trying to cover all the bases.
It does, doesn't it? And what I find interesting is their emphasis on tangible solutions. They're not just talking about abstract concepts. They're building platforms, creating programs, establishing physical spaces to make their vision a reality.
Right. Let's start with this fortifying democracies thing. They have this platform called 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗡𝗏, an AI-managed social media space. Imagine that, a social media platform designed for constructive dialogue and collaboration.
Instead of all the, all the negativity and echo chambers we see everywhere else. Is that even possible? How would an AI actually manage that? Well, that's where it gets really interesting. TATANKA claims that 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗡 uses AI to filter out disinformation and promote inclusivity. Now, whether that's achievable in practice remains to be seen. Some might argue that relying on AI to curate our online conversations could lead to censorship or bias. But on the other hand, if it could actually work, it would be a total game changer.
Think about the possibilities. A platform where people can actually engage in meaningful debate and find common ground, even on the toughest issues. It sounds almost like utopian. But maybe that's the point, right? To aim for something better, even if it seems impossible at first.
Exactly. And that seems to be the underlying message of TATANKA's entire project. They're pushing for a more idealistic future, a future where collaboration and empathy trump. Division and fear.
Okay. So besides this very ambitious social media platform, how else are they working to fortify democracies?
Well, their approach goes beyond just the digital space. They're also focused on building physical spaces for community engagement, places where people can connect, learn, and collaborate in the real world. They call them cultural hubs. And they plan to establish them in underserved regions around the world.
And the article gives us a specific example of this, right?
Yes. They highlight a cultural hub in Delhi. It's designed to be a truly inclusive space, welcoming people from all walks of life. They mentioned refugees, indigenous leaders, climate activists, you name it. It's meant to be a toilet, like a melting pot of ideas and perspectives.
Wow. It really makes you think about what kind of creative solutions could emerge from bringing such a diverse group of people together.
Exactly. And that's just one example. They're aiming to build similar hubs globally, hoping to impact tens of thousands of individuals annually.
Ambitious for sure. But let's be real. Building physical spaces and fostering community engagement, it takes serious resources. How is TATANKA funding all of this?
Well, from what I gather, they rely heavily on donations and partnerships with philanthropic organizations. But of course, that raises questions about long-term sustainability. Can they maintain this level of impact? If those funding sources dry up, it's a valid concern. It's something we should definitely keep in mind as we explore their work further.
Okay, so we've talked about fortifying democracies through digital platforms and community spaces. But what about those big, those global challenges? How does TATANKA approach things like climate change, poverty, and inequality?
Right. That's where their third focus area comes in, addressing global challenges. Right. Again, they're not just talking about it, they're taking concrete action. They have a program called Earth Guardians, which combines indigenous ecological knowledge
with modern technology
to tackle issues like deforestation and renewable energy.
Wait, hold on. Indigenous knowledge and modern tech. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's actually a fascinating approach. They believe that by combining traditional wisdom with cutting-edge innovations, they can develop more sustainable and effective solutions. For example, they're working on projects that use indigenous farming techniques to restore degraded land and promote food security.
That's such a cool idea. It's like they're taking the best of both worlds and blending them together to create something truly unique and impactful. I mean, it's definitely a different approach than what we usually see from, say, governments or big corporations.
Absolutely. And that's what makes TATANKA's work so intriguing. They're not afraid to challenge conventional thinking and experiment with new approaches.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've got these two Project 2025's, one seemingly pushing for a more authoritarian future, the other championing love and unity as the solution to the world's problems. TATANKA is building social media platforms, establishing community hubs, and blending indigenous knowledge with modern tech to tackle global challenges. But here's what I'm wondering. Is all this really possible? Can a group like TATANKA truly make a difference on such a grand scale?
Well, I think that's the question we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into their work. And to really understand their vision, I think we need to look at the people behind it, the individuals who are driving this quiet rebellion of peace.
I'm all for it. Let's dive in.
One of the things that really sets TATANKA apart is their unique leadership framework.
Oh, yeah. They talk about matriarchal leadership in the article.
Right. And it's not just about having women in charge. It's about embracing a different set of values and principles.
So what are we talking about here? What does matriarchal leadership actually look like in practice?
Well, they emphasize qualities like empathy, collaboration, sustainability, and a focus on community well-being. So it's a sharp contrast to the more hierarchical, power-driven structures they associate with the Heritage Foundation's vision.
It's less about top-down control and more about grassroots empowerment.
Exactly. And they believe this approach is essential for addressing the complex challenges we face today. Issues like climate change, inequality, and social division. They require collective action and a willingness to listen to diverse perspectives.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would a world led by, more collaborative, community-focused leaders actually look like? Would we see different outcomes?
It's a fascinating thought experiment.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a world where political decisions were made with a greater emphasis on empathy and the long-term well-being of both people and the planet.
Yeah. It's a pretty radical departure from the way things are currently done in most places.
And that's precisely what TATANKA is advocating for, a radical shift in our approach to leadership and governance.
Okay, so they're rethinking leadership, building community hubs, creating this wild AI-powered social media platform. It's all very impressive, but also very focused on the U.S., wouldn't you say? I mean, the Heritage Foundation is definitely U.S.-centric, but what about TATANKA?
That's a great observation, and actually, it's one of the key distinctions they make in the article. While the Heritage Foundation's vision seems to center on reshaping America, TATANKA takes a much more global approach.
No, it's not just about make America great again, but make the world great again.
Well, they wouldn't phrase it quite like that. But the sentiment is similar. They believe that the challenges we face are interconnected and that solutions require global cooperation. They see their work as part of a larger movement for positive change that transcends national borders.
And their impact goes beyond those cultural hubs that we talked about, right? I mean, they mention other initiatives in the article.
Exactly. They highlight their efforts to address the global refugee crisis, for example. They're developing an online platform
Yeah.
That connects displaced individuals with resources and support networks around the world.
That's incredible. It's like they're creating a virtual safety net for people who have been forced to flee their homes.
And they're also doing a lot of work on climate change mitigation with projects focused on reforestation and renewable energy in multiple countries. They mention aiming to restore thousands of acres of forest land over the next few years.
Wow. Okay. So they're tackling some pretty big issues head on, but sometimes, it's the personal stories that really bring these grand visions down to earth. In the TATANKA article does a great job of that. With the story of 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗓.
Oh, yes. 𝗧𝗔𝗧's story is incredibly powerful. It really brings to life the impact that TATANKA's work can have on an individual level.
For those who haven't read the article, can you give us a quick recap of 𝗧𝗔𝗧's journey?
Well, 𝗧𝗧 is a transgender woman from Nepal who faced significant discrimination and hardship. She felt marginalized and invisible, struggling to find her place in the world then. She learned about TATANKA's work and their message of inclusion. It gave her a glimmer of hope.
And that hope leads her to the Delhi Cultural Hub, right?
Exactly. She travels to Delhi and finds a welcoming community at the hub. She starts learning new skills, connecting with people from diverse backgrounds, and for the first time, feels truly seen and accepted for who she is.
It's amazing how a single space, a single community can have such a profound impact on someone's life.
And it doesn't stop there. 𝗧𝗧 goes on to learn how to code and develops an anti-discrimination platform that's implemented across multiple TATANKA hubs. Her work even sparks policy changes at a governmental level.
Wow. Talk about making a difference. It's a testament to her resilience and the transformative power of opportunity.
It really is.
Yeah.
𝗧𝗧's story is a perfect example of how TATANKA's vision translates into tangible, positive change in people's lives. It's about empowering individuals to overcome adversity and use their talents to make the world a better place.
It's inspiring, for sure, but I'm also curious about the people behind TATANKA itself. Who are these folks who are spearheading this movement?
Well, the article doesn't delve too deep into the individual leaders, but it does highlight their unique approach to community building. They have this interesting cohabitation model for their core team.
Cohabitation, like they all live together.
Yes. They've created this intentional community where their staff, artists, activists, tech innovators, and thought leaders from around the world live and work together in a shared space.
Whoa. That's pretty radical. I mean, it's one thing to talk about unity and collaboration, but it's another thing entirely to actually live it out on a daily basis.
Exactly. And they believe that this model is essential for fostering the kind of deep trust and understanding that's needed to drive their mission forward.
So, it's like a living, breathing embodiment of their values.
Precisely. And it's not just about their internal team either. They extend this spirit of cohabitation to their cultural hubs, creating spaces where people from different backgrounds can come together, share ideas, and build relationships.
It's a fascinating approach, and it definitely makes you think about the possibilities of intentional community building. I mean, could this be a model for a more collaborative and harmonious future?
It's certainly a compelling idea, and one that's worth exploring further. But of course, no approach is without its challenges.
Right. I imagine living and working in such close proximity with people from diverse backgrounds could lead to conflict and friction at times.
Absolutely. And that's something the article doesn't really address. It would be interesting to learn more about how they navigate those inevitable interpersonal challenges and maintain a sense of unity amidst such diversity.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. But overall, it seems like TATANKA is really putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak. They're not just talking about change, they're actively creating it through their actions, their leadership model, and even their living arrangement.
And that brings us to their call to action. They're actively seeking partners and supporters to join their movement.
They're not just building this utopian bubble for themselves, they want others to join in.
Exactly. They see their work as a catalyst for a larger global shift towards a more just, equitable, and sustainable future. And they believe that everyone has a role to play in making that vision a reality.
It's a powerful message for sure. But let's not forget about that other project, 2025, lurking in the background. We've explored TATANKA's vision in depth, but we still need to give the Heritage Foundation their due.
You're absolutely right. It's important to remember that we've only heard one side of the story so far.
And based on the TATANKA article, it sounds like the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is advocating for a very different and potentially worrisome future.
Yes. The article paints a pretty stark picture, suggesting that their vision is based on consolidating power, promoting nationalist agendas, and potentially eroding democratic institutions. But again, it's crucial to remember that this is just one perspective. What do we do? How do we get a more balanced understanding of what the Heritage Foundation is actually proposing?
Well, ideally, we would need to go beyond the TATANKA article and delve into the Heritage Foundation's own materials. We need to read their reports, listen to their speeches, and analyze their policy proposals. Only then could we form a truly informed opinion.
And that's what the deep dive is all about, right? Going beyond the surface and exploring multiple perspectives.
Exactly. And in this case, it's particularly important, given the potential implications of these two competing visions for the future.
Okay. So let's shift gears and dive into the world of the Heritage Foundation. What can you tell us about this organization? What are their core beliefs and values? Well, the Heritage Foundation is a conservative think. It's a conservative think tank that has been around for decades. They're known for their advocacy of
free market principles, limited government,
and a strong national defense. They've been influential in shaping Republican policy for many years.
They're coming from a very different ideological standpoint than TATANKA, to say the least.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this comparison so fascinating. We're talking about two fundamentally different worldviews clashing head-on.
And according to the TATANKA article, the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is a blueprint for putting their conservative ideology into action across all levels of government.
That's right. The article claims that they're aiming to dismantle what they see as the administrative state, reduce regulations, and shift power away from the federal government and back to the states.
Less big government and more individual liberty.
That's the gist of it. But the TATANKA article frames this as a dangerous move that could undermine democratic norms and lead to a more authoritarian style of governance.
And that's where things get really tricky, right? Because on the surface, the idea of less government interference and more individual freedom might sound appealing to some, but the question is, at what cost?
Exactly, and that's the crux of the debate here. Is the Heritage Foundation's vision a path to greater freedom and prosperity, as they claim? Or is it a slippery slope towards a more divided and less democratic society, as TATANKA suggests?
Okay, so we've got these two contrasting visions, and both sides are making strong claims. How do we even begin to sort through all of this and figure out what's really going on?
I think the first step is to try and understand the Heritage Foundation's perspective on its own terms. Let's set aside the TATANKA article for a moment and dive into some of the Heritage Foundation's own publications.
Sounds like a plan. Let's see what they have to say for themselves.
So one of their key publications is a report titled "Mandate for Leadership: The Conservative Promise." It's essentially a comprehensive policy agenda for a future
Republican administration. Okay. And what does this mandate for leadership have to say about Project 2025?
Well, it doesn't explicitly mention Project 2025 by name, but it lays out a vision for a smaller, less intrusive federal government. They argue that overregulation and bureaucratic bloat have stifled economic growth and individual liberty.
Their goal is to streamline government and get it out of the way of, businesses and individuals.
Exactly. They propose significant cuts to federal agencies, deregulation across various industries, and tax reforms aimed at stimulating economic growth. They also emphasize a shift in power away from the federal government and back to the states.
And how does that tie into the TATANKA article's claims about dismantling the administrative state?
Right. Well, that's where the interpretation gets tricky. The Heritage Foundation argues that they're simply trying to make government more efficient and accountable. They believe that many federal agencies have become bloated and unresponsive to the needs of the people.
But TATANKA sees it as a more sinister move, right? Like they're trying to gut essential government functions and consolidate power.
Yeah, that's their interpretation, yes. They argue that the Heritage Foundation's proposals would weaken environmental protections, undermine social safety net programs, and erode the government's ability to address critical issues like climate change.
It's interesting how the same set of policy proposals can be framed in such radically different ways.
It really is. It really highlights the power of language and framing in shaping public perception. And it underscores the importance of looking beyond the rhetoric and carefully examining the potential consequences of these proposed changes.
So where do we go from here? We've got these two diametrically opposed visions for the future. One based on love, unity, and global collaboration. The other focused on limited government, individual liberty, and a strong national identity. How do we even begin to reconcile these seemingly incompatible worldviews?
Right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I pretend to have a simple answer. But I think It starts with recognizing that these are not just abstract ideological debates. They have real-world consequences for people's lives.
Right. These are not just theoretical exercises. We're talking about different approaches to governance, different visions for society, different pathways for the future.
Exactly. And the choices we make today will determine which path we ultimately take. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to engage in these conversations thoughtfully, to critically evaluate the arguments being presented, and to make informed decisions about the kind of future we want to create.
Well said. And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive, to explore these two competing visions for 2025, to highlight the key points of contention, and to encourage our listeners to think critically about the choices before us.
And I think we've accomplished that goal. We've presented a nuanced and balanced perspective, avoiding partisan bias and focusing on the facts and the potential implications of these different approaches.
Absolutely. We haven't shied away from the complexities of these issues, and we've encouraged our listeners to draw their own conclusions.
And ultimately, that's what the Deep Dive is all about, empowering our listeners to become informed, engaged citizens who can participate meaningfully in shaping the future.
So, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. We've explored these two Project 2025's, but the question remains, what does your Project 2025 look like? What kind of future do you envision for yourself, your community, and the world?
And what steps can you take today to start building that future? It's a question worth pondering, and one that we hope will continue to resonate long after this episode ends.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper.